Good morning, and welcome to the first of three videos on the lymphatic system. Now, um, oftentimes people will just conclude that the lymphatic system's major role in the body is to provide immunity from diseases, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, and so on that will invade the body and make you sick. But although that is a major role, it is not the only role that the lymphatic system plays. The lymphatic system has a series of capillaries that are designed to absorb fluid from your cells, from your tissues, and return it back to the bloodstream. There are specialized lymphatic capillaries in your small intestines that are designed to absorb fats from the small intestine, right? Proteins amino acids and glucose are absorbed directly into the blood, but fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed into lymphatic capillaries. And so there are other aspects to the lymphatic system. Now, with that said, one of the major roles of the lymphatic system is to help to provide immunity for your body from certain diseases. And before we actually talk about things that can make you sick, I do want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about microbes, right? Small cells or even microscopic particles in the environment, all right? The first thing that you have to understand is that microbes are exceptionally abundant in the environment. Okay, they are all over every surface. They are on your skin. They are in your body all the time. As a matter of fact, there was a study done that estimates that if you were to pull every cell off of and out of the human body, that the number of human cells would be outnumbered by the number of bacterial cells by 9 to 1. All right. So if you're made of 1 trillion cells, then there are 9 trillion bacteria living on you. Now remember, the bacteria cells are about 5% the size of a human cell on average. Now, we use microbes, these bacteria and other things, to make many foods. Yogurt, cheese, and a host of other things are created by bacteria. We use yeast, single-celled fungi, to produce bread and beer. And we can even use bacteria to produce drugs. Insulin, synthetic insulin is often produced by bacteria. All right, and we'll talk about how that's done later on. In the ecological world, microbes are very important decomposers. All right, when an organism dies, it is broken down by bacteria, and the nutrients that makes it up are returned to the soil. There are other forms of decomposers as well, but bacteria play a major role. Imagine all of the dead leaves, dead trees, dead animals in the forest. All right, they would just continue to pile up and pile up and pile up if it wasn't for these bacteria breaking them down. With all of that said, there are some microbes, of course, that can cause disease in humans. All right, we've just spent the last few months in a lockdown imposed on us by government agencies to keep us safe from the coronavirus. All right, whether that's true or not, I'm not really certain, but we'll assume for the sake of argument that it was. And so there are bad microbes out there, microbes that can and do make us sick. Okay, so what kinds of microbes are out there? Well, the first and probably most familiar type are the bacteria. Now remember that bacteria are prokaryotic cells. That means that they're very tiny compared to a typical eukaryotic cell, about 5% of the size. They are single-celled, all of them, and almost all of them are covered by a cell wall. Outside the cell membrane, all right, the plasma membrane, there's a thick wall made of some kind of matrix, and different bacteria have different types. But those cell walls are protective in nature. Their DNA is found in a single chromosome, and you can see it, this dark purple area in here, these fibers. That's a single bacterial chromosome. And although they don't have many organelles, they do have ribosomes. And if you recall from chapter 3, I think it was, maybe 2, 3, ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. Now, on a weird note, bacteria also have a specialized ring of DNA called a plasmid. And scientists, over the course of the last 20 years or so, have really learned how to use plasmids for a variety of different reasons. We have been able to insert genes for certain proteins into bacterial plasmids. For example, the gene that produces insulin has been inserted into the plasmids of certain bacteria, and then they're grown on a petri dish and they produce insulin. And so, although I'm not sure that this is still the major method of producing insulin in this country, for a while, synthetic insulin was mostly bacterially produced. Now, the bottom of this slide shows the 3 major shapes of bacteria, which are round, which we call coccus bacteria. So if you've ever heard of streptococcus, for example, strep throat is caused by one of the streptococcus bacteria. That just means that the cell is round. There are bacillus bacteria, which are rod-shaped, and then there are spirilla bacteria, which are spiral-shaped. And so if you hear a name that has coccus in it or bacillus in it, that just refers to the shape of these particular bacteria. Okay, what are viruses? Well, a virus is very different than a bacteria. Whereas a bacteria is a living cell, viruses are simply strands of DNA. They are not alive, all right? So you cannot kill a virus, all right? You can destroy it, but you can't kill it because it's not alive, all right? It's like killing a zombie. Can you kill a zombie? All right, well, technically zombies aren't alive, so no. Anyway, they are small, non-living, obligate parasites, all right? In other words, they're like little pirates, okay? They hijack your cell, and they take over. And essentially what they do is they use your cellular structure in order to replicate. Okay, that's the only thing that they do. But they have to reproduce, they have to replicate inside of a host cell. Now, all viruses are composed of an outer protein coat, and they have either RNA or DNA inside of them. The one over here on the right actually looks kind of like the coronavirus, COVID-19, that we've been dealing with recently. And the DNA inside is, or RNA, is used as the code to help produce and reproduce more copies of itself. Now, interestingly enough, viruses are very specific to which cell they attach and which cells they enter. And so, typically you get certain viral infections. If you get viral pneumonia, that attacks your lungs. It doesn't attack your muscles. It doesn't attack your small intestines. It attacks your lungs. Viral hepatitis attacks the liver as opposed to any place else. All right, so they tend to be very specific about which cells they invade. Now, prions are another type of pathogen or microbe that can be pathogenic. And rather than being DNA or RNA, they are composed of proteins. But other than that, they're very similar to viruses. But no DNA or RNA, they are simply proteins. And they are dangerous in many cases because they can produce a group of degenerative nervous diseases, including Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and bovine spongiform encephalopathy. This is also known as mad cow disease. Now, this was rampant probably 15 years ago or so. You guys are probably young enough that you haven't even ever heard of it. But these prions tend to migrate to the nervous system. And so they are transmitted. First of all, they cause disease in the organism that has them. But they are transmitted by eating the brains and nerve tissue from infected animals. And so if you grind up cow meat and you feed it to other cows, right, and which has apparently happened, even though cows are herbivores, that can transmit mad cow disease from one cow to the next. It can also transmit the mad cow disease to you if you eat nervous tissue. And if you cook up a steak, all right, there are nerves in that steak, right? What is meat but really just muscle? And so, this can be passed from one animal to the next. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is the idea of antibiotic resistance. All right. Many of you have probably heard of the disease MRSA. It stands for methicillin, which is an antibiotic, resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is a type of staph infection. Now, unfortunately, over the course of the last 50 years or so, physicians have been prescribing antibiotics for just about everything because they want to keep their patients happy, right? If you go into a doctor's office and you're not feeling well and he doesn't prescribe you a drug to make you feel better, you are less likely to go back to him. And unfortunately, medicine was driven for a long time by economics, all right? It still is to a large degree, although now it's really in the hands of the insurance companies. So what was happening is that you end up with a bunch of bacteria in your body, and one of them might have a small mutation that allows it to be resistant to a certain antibiotic. And so you take the antibiotic and all the other bacteria die, but the resistant one lives. And so in the next generation, that one reproduces more than the others, and they become more common. All right, and this eventually causes the entire population of those viruses to evolve into a resistant strain, which is very dangerous because we don't have the ability to treat it easily. The way to avoid this is to stop prescribing antibiotics for minor head colds and that sort of thing. And doctors have been doing a pretty good job recently of avoiding that kind of thing. But think about this, all right? Viruses are not alive, and therefore they can't be destroyed by antibiotics. So if you go into your doctor's office with a viral infection and you demand antibiotics, you are part of the problem here. All right, an antibiotic is not going to cure a viral disease. How do you tell, by the way, the difference between a viral disease and a chest disease, head cold, that kind of thing, and a bacterial? All right. Well, the viral ones invade the cells and they don't produce a lot of mucus. Bacterial cells produce a lot of mucus, and so if your snot is green, then you probably have a bacterial infection. If it's clear, you probably have a viral infection. Now, there are exceptions to this, so don't go into your doctor's office telling them, oh, well, it's got to be this or that. But that's a general rule. Now, we've already covered this, but we're going to start the 4 functions of the lymphatic system in the next video. So this was the first of 3, and I hope you learned something.